So, hi Frost, I'm Casey from the Spike. Obviously, we've talked before, but this time, new team, new jersey. Well, old team, new
Yeah.
jersey. So, how are you feeling? I know the last few weeks must have been quite stressful for you.
Yeah, it was kind of all over the place. Felt like we didn't have a lot of time, but I'm still feeling good. I think it really helped that obviously I know them so well, but still crazy 3 weeks, man. Crazy 3 weeks.
Still, it's a good start for stage two. Even with all the drama that has been happening, you guys still managed to pull out the win. So, I just want to ask you about that. How do you think it affects you mentally? How do you think it affects your team, and also how do you think it affects your prep and your coaching style?
Just so I get this clear, you're asking that question from the perspective of time?
Not just time, but also, it affects you mentally, right? Because it puts you under a lot of stress. So,
Yeah.
everything combined.
Mm, I think I'm fortunate that I've been through a lot of stuff in my life, especially esports. I mean, if people really knew some of the disappointments I've had in my life when it comes to esports and stuff, I think they'd realize that even this GE thing didn't bother me that much. I think it's more just the fact that I think I can't create a culture of, I think, openness and sort of like accountability as much as I would like to. Because, even at 100 Thieves and at GE, it ended basically the exact same way. It's funny that here, though, with Thai kids, because they are young, they're not old. I mean, Cruz is obviously old, but it's funny that here, like, they're okay with it. You know, they know I'm mad at them about the throws in this game. We should have started Haven 7-0, and we threw three 5v3s in the first 7 rounds of this game. Like, what is this? And we were just talking about it now, and like, I told them how frustrated I was about it, and that review tomorrow is gonna be, tough. And they're all just like, yeah, we know, our bad, but we got you though. We still won, So it's like the perspective is like, my bad, we know, we got to fix that. But hey, we won. And like, it's just interesting how, like, you know, even with a different culture, right, and a different background, that, I just seem to be a better fit with people that are, I think, a little bit more objective. So, if anything, that's probably the difference or the stressful part is always feeling as if, sometimes you have to walk on eggshells when you try to make corrections. I'm just not from a culture where you need to do that, man. Like, I messed up, my bad, it's on me, move on. But that's not how it is everywhere.
All right. Hopefully this time your stint with Full Sense, it can go according to how you're planning. Now,
Yeah.
this question, everybody wants to know the answer to this question. You are playing GE next week. What are your expectations from that matchup?
I think we're a stronger team. To me, I I don't care, and I already told them who cares. Like, I don't need them to win for me. I think it's more just my goal is to make it to champs, and that's like the only thing I care about. I know it's going to be a big game for everybody. I know people kind of like the drama and stuff, but from my perspective, it's going to be business as usual. There's just another team that we're playing against, and when we think about how we're going to beat them, there will be no personal feelings from my side coming out in that matchup. Trust me, there won't.
All right, that's a great mentality to have. Now, obviously you're also working with Coach THEE now with in Full Sense. Now, compared to GE, now now that you're working with Coach THEE, how would you say your coaching styles have changed, or how would you say your philosophy has changed from GE to Full Sense?
My style, my philosophy hasn't changed. I'll say that I was a little apprehensive at first because normally when you get demoted, it causes resentment, and I didn't want, you know, I made a cruise or I made it a point to tell Cruz, like, if they don't want me there, it's okay. Like, I can still help you on the side, right? Just like telling him, like, hey, look, even if I'm not coaching, I'll still help you with anything you need. And he told me, no, I already talked to them. And one of the things I thought was surprising was Thee and Sushi wanted me here too. And part of it was, I think, what they had heard about me. And then another thing was, we played against them and they have like mutual respect for like, how close the matches were and like all that stuff. And I think that that put me at ease. And that was really interesting that coaches were cool with someone coming in that was not familiar to them and also coming in and then in theory being their superior, and there wasn't ego around that decision. I think that is so rare, and on a personal level I think it says a lot about who they are as men and people, that they can have that perspective. They've been really great to me, and it's been I would say a pretty beautiful working relationship. Like I think people wouldn't believe how seamless the transition was, and I had never worked with them before.
All right, that's fantastic. Now, obviously, he's a strong voice in the team. Also, Sushi, he's also a strong voice. Cruz also is like, well respected and strong voice in the team. Now that you've come in, you also have your own opinions and your, ideas. How does that structure work now that you've been incorporated into this team? Has the adaptation been done, or is it still a work in progress?
Obviously, it's not perfect. It's the full transition hasn't been done, I think, perfectly, obviously, because it's too short of a time. But I'll say that I think the unique thing about this is like my mentality coming in here wasn't to change everything or to like do things my way in a sense. It really was just as a outsider that had beaten them and a guy that has seen them grow up. Some of them were like 19 when I met them. Um, it's giving the perspective of like, here's how I beat you, and here's what I think about what you're doing, and here are the gaps and the weaknesses that you have when you're doing these things, right? And then it was also like delegating who does what and why with myself, Sushi, and Thee. And a small example to that is like even when I get really mad, like before I yell or before I say something crazy, I tell Thee, and Thee's basically like, yeah, yeah. I tell them the Thai way. So like even if I'm getting to the point where I'm about to, boy, what are you doing? He'll be like, I got it. So it's like I don't even have to be that forceful here because I'm used to always being the bad cop. But in some weird way, Thee is the bad cop, which is like kind of unusual because he's like a really nice guy. But um, I think one reason for this is because English, like if I say, what the are you doing? It seems incredibly aggressive, even though, with the language, like culturally, sometimes you don't even mean it to be that way. Like I'm not trying to fight you about this. It just comes out. That's the slang that's used. But in Thai, you really can't do that. So it's more like direct, but it isn't as, I guess, aggressive. And it's kind of funny because I don't even have to get mad because Thee just says what I need to be said for me, and then I just move on to the next thing. So it's actually kind of cool.
Okay, now, speaking of the players, Primmie on Deadlock, I know you already spoke about it in the press conference, but it was your
Yeah.
idea to have the team not rely on him so heavily in the big games. Can you elaborate more about that idea?
It's really just if we want to play Jett and we want to let Primmie play duelists that can fight and stuff, it's just do they have the tools to stop Neon Phoenix? And Jett doesn't. And the one thing that I knew we could lean on, because Sage is not complicated, but you need to have a particular person on Sage. And I also figured that Nongshim would think that we would run Sage, so they'd probably prep for Sage. I didn't think they would prep for Deadlock and Cypher. And because Primmie had familiarity, Cruz had familiarity, calling with the comp, like everyone is familiar with this comp in here. It was easier to say, hey, listen, how about we do this for the two maps that they're going to pick, the one they're going to pick and the one that I'm going to pick. Obviously, it required the veto to go exactly how I predicted, which was obviously fortunate for me that I did. And it required them to kind of like have trust. And I think we should have gotten out of here with a 2-0 and not even having to show a cent. But either way, even though things didn't go as planned and even though things were a little bit rocky and we didn't play as well as we wanted to, we can still take a win from a really good team. And I think that is very positive. I'm not going to say that I'm going to keep them on deadlock every map, but for this matchup, I thought it was very important that we slow them down, and I think we did enough to win.
All right. Thank you so much, Frost. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
agreeing for this interview, and all the best for your
Appreciate
upcoming
it.
matchup.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.